US, where where you have Jan LeCun, right? He's a good, brilliant example, right? He's working with Meta, and at the same time, he's a distinguished professor.
Yeah.
And this goes on in MIT and Stanford and everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly.
And we don't have that sort of legacy. We don't.
No, but I've been also trying to do the same, to drive research happening in industry in different ways in my past. So I'm very happy to hear that you're also interested in trying to drive that agenda a bit more. But perhaps you can come back to also your new affiliation, so to speak, because you mentioned you left KTH and moved into SEB, but you still were there during your free time, right? Or how was it?
I was there as a ghost. Exactly.
Ghost researcher.
Yes.
No, it's the classic. Some people, you love the academic setting, and I kind of not want to leave. You know, it's the people who never graduate as well. You know.
Yeah, some people never leave the student environment, so to speak. We have the Matthias from Linköping. He's like 50 plus, and he's still in the student.
Yeah, he's doing good work as well, but he has. Yeah.
But still, okay. So you were still there at KTH doing like close to research work, but on your free time, basically.
Exactly.
But you recently was appointed some kind of more formal.
Yes. So now I have like the paper that basically is signed by both KTH and SEB and says that, okay, I'm an affiliated faculty in this school. I work on these topics. Yeah. So it's a formal setup.
And what basically do you do as an... What's the formal name? Affiliated faculty? Is that the proper name for it?
Exactly. That's what it's called. I know the title says nothing.
Yeah. But it is in computer science at least, right?
Yes.
Or
yes.
What's the area?
Yes. So I'm affiliated with the School of Computer Science and Electrical Engineering. Yeah. But yes, my area is computer science. That's where I did my PhD. That's where my whole education is.
Right. And you continue to work with robotics, or the area, or what's
yes, exactly. So I'm not a hardware robotics person. I'm more interested into how we can use algorithms to make robot move and do things. So now that I started, I would like us to look a little bit more into how both foundation models can be used for robotics, but also how embodied agents can be used to train better foundation models. Kind of explore this overlap.
Yeah, very apt and interesting topic. We had a couple of people from the robotics side here before, and a lot of course, software people as well. To have someone that combines both of them, I think, is
very interesting.
Super interesting. So with that, we would love to formally welcome you here, Anastasia Varava. Was that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Wow.
And you are a research lead at SEBx, right, as it's called. You had a PhD, as we spoke about before, from KTH in robotics, or you can define it yourself later more properly, I think. And you also associated with WARA, like the WASP research arena.
Yes.
And it's the media language or the NLP field.
So we're WARA for Media and Language.
Yeah.
And I'm one of the members of the core team.
Yeah.
So I'm basically co-running it with a few other great people.
So many interesting topics here to cover. But before we go into all of them, perhaps you can give a quick background about yourself. Who is really Anastasia? What is your background? What is your interests? How did you come to be who you are today?
I would say I'm a computer scientist, broadly, if we're talking professionally. So I like to see myself as someone in between industry and research. So you can say I'm an applied researcher at this point.
But and before you go on, I just want to add that maybe one of the themes that we can kind of circle around, I think, is this, how do we bridge the gap between academia, applied research in organizations, and actually how do we get an even stronger, higher productivity out of this? I think this is a logical, overarching theme today. I mean, like, I know this is close to your heart, and it's close to our heart as well.
Yes. Let's make sure to get back to that question shortly. Yeah, it's a very interesting one.
But it's really this SEBx, R&D in SEBx, and then KTH, and all this and what WARA is trying to get that done and everything.
Yeah.
So please back to the who you are. But I think that was just appropriate to frame it.
Yes. So I'm an applied computer scientist. To put it in one sentence, maybe. If I
may just interrupt quickly, do you think we can do basic research in industry?
You can, and for example, DeepMind does that, but that requires quite a lot of investment, a lot of risk appetite, and
I'm so eager to jump in this topic, but I'm trying to keep bounds on myself to not go there already. But cool. Okay, applied researcher, working both in industry and academia then. But before that, can you just describe a bit, what's your interest? How did you come into the person you are today?
How did I become a computer scientist? I was a computer science nerd back at school. So I come from Ukraine originally, and I went to a specialized school for people interested in math, informatics, and things like that. As I was growing up in high school, I did more and more competitive programming at the time, so I really liked algorithms and things like that. And then it was very natural to just go and study computer science. And then somewhere, maybe in the second year of university, I got really interested in pure math. So I kind of navigated a little bit more to applied math, which was in between.
But I think that's an interesting point, because some people come more from the programming side and then become perhaps more into math. But you came from the math side and then
I like to solve problems. I'm not. I've never been interested in programming for the sake of developing product.
Right.
So algorithmic computer science was originally my thing when I was a kid, and then kind of added math interest to that. So that's.
And then you started in. When did you move to KTH?
Yes, so I moved to KTH in 2014, I think, to do my PhD.
Yes, when you got and was starting your PhD, you started it.
1st of October 2014.
In KTH.
Yes.
And is this when you came to Stockholm?
That was my first day in Stockholm.
Yeah,
Yes.
first day.
I remember it as if it were yesterday.
Fantastic.
Was that a positive or negative experience?
I was super happy. I was very young. I was full of hopes. No, I really loved the topic of my PhD. And that was kind of the only reason why I moved to Sweden in the first place.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so you did your PhD, and that was with Danisha from the start in our lab as well?
Yeah.
And if you were to just try to describe briefly perhaps your PhD, what was it really about?
It was about designing algorithms for robotics, more precisely for path planning and manipulation from the kind of geometrical perspective. So in reality, I did quite a bit of computational geometry, a bit of computational topology to enable safe robotic manipulation and navigation among obstacles.
And so in layman's terms, who can't follow this too tricky language, it's about making the robots navigate in a complex space.
Yes, exactly. In cluttered environments where you have
not killing humans.
Exactly, and having provable guarantees that that's not going to happen.
Yeah, so basically finding the safe boundaries, that this is,
Yes.
Stuff like this.
Exactly.
And the core technique is geometric.
Yes.
What is that? How do you
so computational geometry, so you work... this is going to be technical.
Please, he loves it.
Yeah.
I'm not here to stop being technical. It should be technical. I'm here to, can I see if I get it? That's all. Don't go technical. That's super fun.
So, okay. I will still try to make it a bit higher.
Forget about me.
So I work quite a lot with simplicial complexes, like geometric representations of simplicial complexes. To essentially model obstacles and generally spaces in which robotic systems are, and kind of trying to understand how much objects can move with respect to obstacles, how much the robot can interact with them, whether if you, for example, grasp an object, whether it's going to fall on the floor or not, whether a robot can move from one point to another, with a guarantee.
So just to give an example, basically you have some kind of environment which you set up mathematically.
Essentially you just represent, you represent this room as, you kind of model it as a 3D model, you can say it like this.
And then you have a set of obstacles inside that room.
Yes, and that's a part of your environment.
Right.
All of those things are a part of your environment.
And then you want to find some potential path?
Yes, so it's kind of a dual problem in a sense, because sometimes you want to restrict the mobility of the object if you want to manipulate it. And in that sense, you want to prove that that happened, so it cannot kind of escape from you, it cannot fall.
Right.
But you can also consider the dual problem, which is the robot wants to move from point A to point B, and you kind of want to understand whether it's possible or not, so whether there is a path.
So both these objectives can be solved with the same method,
Yes,
I guess,
exactly.
And if we put it in simple terms, if you have a Tesla car that wants to move from one point in New York to another, for one, you want to see, can you stop it from actually going to the White House or whatever?
Yeah, you can see it that way. It becomes more, it's not maybe so much a geometric problem at this point, but yes, absolutely.
But at the same time, if you wanted to go to the White House, the same method you used to avoid it can also be used to potentially prove that it can.
Yeah.
But is it good? You made a good comment. So when is the geometric approach most useful?
So it's when you interact with physical objects. When what kind of restricts your mobility is physical obstacles.
Okay.
That's where geometry comes in. You can take it to a different level of abstraction and say that, okay, I don't have a geometric obstacle here, but for example, if I'm a car and this region is forbidden for me, then I can also represent that as a virtual obstacle, so to say, so you can add those things as well. But yeah, originally we were talking about physical obstacles.
And where has the application of geometrical approaches, are there any use cases or examples where this is quite used today in different, I mean, like I have in my head the lawn mower, the robotic, when is the geometrical, when has that sort of been mostly put in production, if I ask it like that you know of?
Oh, in production, I don't know. That was like research.
This is research. This is okay, good.
But you mentioned also, of course, you working in more theory land here and not the practical world, at least in the beginning of your thesis. What would you say the usefulness, or besides the nicety of having a mathematically provable, solution to it? Can you elaborate a bit more? What can having a provable guarantee be useful for?
So if you work with safety critical applications, I think it's fundamental that you can actually prove something to kind of have the certificate that, okay, nothing can go wrong here.
Yeah.
I think that's the main advantage of having that.
Yeah.
So even, I guess, in real life, when you have very, like for one, partially observable environments and also dynamic environment where things change all the time, you can never have 100% observability. But
yes, you can have some lower bounds on how much you can move, and because you cannot. So if you're working with really complex environments and perhaps your perception system is not perfect, and perhaps things can also move without you being able to perfectly track them, but you can still have some sort of estimate for where for sure you will have obstacles, and that kind of gives you an estimate. So that estimate can be conservative if you want to, again, deal with safety. So you want to show that, okay, if you're doing, I don't know, automated surgery, like or robotic assisted surgery, and you want to kind of really prove that something cannot possibly go wrong. Yeah. Or if you do stuff with autonomous driving, for example, right? So you can kind of have a way to model this problem in a more conservative way, and you show that this area for sure is going to be an obstacle.
I think that's a clear case for it, and being able to at least have some lower bound, as you say, to ensure that at least we can say it won't be worse than this, so to speak. In some sense, is a really interesting point.
But did you finish your PhD before you started SEB?
Yes, and I actually worked as a postdoc for a couple of years.
Oh, you did as well,
yeah.
Oh. How was that?
That was very different. I expected it to be exactly the same.
Yeah.
Until day one, when I started, and suddenly I had I think 6 or 8 PhD students to co-supervise.
Yeah. So the big difference is now you focus on your own research, and now you're supervising seven different projects. Yeah,
exactly. And that was quite a lot of. I mean, and those students were rather junior as well, so they needed a lot of support. So that was not easy.
Yeah.
And all the context switching, but that was really good.
So what's the context switching, of course, is massive with 6-7 people.
Yeah.
And then you all of a sudden your pedagogical, all these topics comes really up front.
And a sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
Okay, but at some point then you went, I guess, from the postdoc into SEB in some way. Can you just speak a bit more? How did that introduction to SEB come about?
I don't think I would think of applying to a bank necessarily if I didn't know Salla Francén.
Yeah,
which we had on the. It's so fun. So we knew this.
She's an awesome person, of course.
Salla is an awesome person, and Salla's been on this podcast. And if you haven't listened to that podcast, go and listen to Salla Francén's podcast.
Yes.
So how did you know Salla? Is actually the real question.
I actually knew her from the lab.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And how did? Well, she was also a ghost in the lab.
Yes, you can say so, because she was supervising an industrial PhD student in our lab. So I knew that she was cool. I knew that she has the background in math, and I just emailed her and asked, "Do you have openings?" And turns out she did.
Okay, so
That's
that
the way
was
to do
how
it.
it started.
Yes.
What was your thinking then? Because you still, love academia in some sense. What made you still take the jump to?
Yes, so actually in my postdoc I did more applied stuff, like more with machine learning. And then at some point I was thinking, okay, so now I spent quite some years in pure research. Now I want to actually see what kind of real applications are out there. And since I was never a hardware robotics person, I kind of didn't have this idea that I necessarily need to work with physical robots.
Right.
So I was very open. I mean, I'm a computer scientist, right? So I was very open to learn about new application areas. And finance is an interesting one. And it's also, wouldn't have so many people with a computer science background in finance.
Right.
So it's a pretty interesting area to be in because there is quite a lot of unexplored stuff.
So sorry, is this 2018, 19? When you started?
3 years ago.
Oh, 3 years ago.
Yeah. So 2021, I think.
Yeah.
I also made a jump, from academia reluctantly, I must say. I didn't want to leave either, and I stayed after my PhD for a number of years, and very, very reluctantly left to industry, but found, values in an industry that I enjoyed more, and I also saw some problem in academia. But I would like to hear your thoughts before I cloud your judgment, so to speak. If you were to say some perhaps negative aspects of academia, what would that be?
I would say at the beginning of your academic career, if you really kind of go for it and optimize for traditional values you have in academia, you need to travel quite a lot. So you need to do like postdoc or even several postdocs abroad, and then you start applying for faculty positions, and that can also be all over the world.
Yeah.
And that becomes difficult with your family and like your life in general.
If you really want to do an academic career towards professor, it's a quite
exactly. And it's kind of easier. Like for example, when I moved here to do a PhD, that was very easy because I was 22 at the time, so I didn't have any preference on which country to go to as long as it was interesting. But then when you get older, it kind of gets harder. Yeah. So that, to me, that's the biggest problem, I think.
Yeah. What do you think about the whole funding workload that you have to do in academia? Did you see that as a problem? Or perhaps you had enough funding anyway through Danny's lab?
In Danny's lab, that has never been a problem. We had the opposite problem.
Well,
there's a couple of labs in the world that can say that.
Yes.
A couple in the world.
But I think for most academians out there, they don't have that luxury. But
yes, I'm well aware of that.
What about paper writing then, or writing papers?
I love to write papers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you some people go into the minimal publicly unit that you can write. Sorry for the horrible phrasing here. There is this kind of sometimes pursuit of maximizing the number of papers you can write with a minimum amount of content in it to be
I don't like
able
that.
to be accepted at some conference.
Yeah, that's actually another problem, which is maybe like a problem of KPIs that you have in academia.
Yeah.
If you need to maximize your H index by whatever means necessary, I think that's wrong.
But did you experience that, or maybe you because
I left early enough.
You left
so
early
I was
enough.
blessed.
I think so. Something has happened here. This feels like...
No, it's more like I left early enough in my career. Like I wasn't actually a faculty, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I did a postdoc for a couple of years, and then I was helping co-supervising students, but I never kind of did a proper faculty career.
No.
So I mean, I was aware of those problems, and I knew that if I were to stay in academia, I would have to deal with that.
Yeah.
But that kind of wasn't my primary concern, because as a PhD student, that's not exactly what you need to optimize for.
Is it a solvable problem, or do you need to rethink?
I think we need to rethink the system. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have any, if someone are listening, do you have any fundamental principal ideas on how to solve it?
First of all, I think we need to treat different, not just areas of science, but maybe even sub-areas of, for example, computer science differently. Because if you work in, say, theoretical computer science, you will not possibly get as many citations as you can get in machine learning for just publishing one benchmark that everyone cites. And that's just not fair.
Yeah. No, it's not fair.
So we need to kind of treat those things very, I think, differently. And I think we need to, when it comes to more applied computer science, I think we need to create a space that is not necessarily even, like where you work is not necessarily even evaluated based on your publications, but more on the impact of the work you do.
Right. This is a key topic, I think.
Exactly, because I think R&D in applied computer science is going to be more and more relevant in the coming years.
Because the whole trend with beating benchmarks is really taking us down the rabbit hole of not doing novel research at all.
Yeah,
it's stupid in terms to a fixed data set that everybody knows.
Yes.
And then that, it's like it's a gamification.
Exactly.
Is that research? I don't think it's research anymore.
I don't think so either, and it's very frustrating to be honest.
It's super frustrating.
Yeah, the hunt for 0.1% on some data
on
set.
a benchmark, right? And
there's no real impact on that anyway.
If we include Andrew Ng and everybody else who says like, real AI needs to work on the data, and it's a lot of when you have a fixed benchmark or a fixed data set, you're taking away the real world AI problem from the whole research.
Exactly.
But with that, perhaps you can elaborate a bit more. I know SEB can't really go into details about how you perhaps use AI or your work to help SEB, but perhaps you can speak in general terms a bit. What do you focus on? What kind of problems do you focus on in SEBx?
So in SEBx, this I can actually cover a little bit. So we started the current iteration of SEBx more or less when the whole hype with ChatGPT came out. And then everyone started calling us and asking, can I use ChatGPT to automate all the processes?
So many times. It's so frustrating. I remember those times.
In your organization. So now I know what you do, Anders.
Okay, sorry.
But yes, anyway, so I was kind of really skeptical and annoyed by it for the first couple of weeks.
Yes, weeks, months for me.
No. But then I realized that it's actually very good that people are interested, because it can actually bring lots of value if you do it the right way.
Yeah.
So what we ended up doing is kind of designing virtual assistants for our employees that would help them in daily work.
Yeah.
But kind of, through providing proper knowledge bases that are relevant for their work, and doing fact checking and providing them references so they can actually click on the link and verify the answer and things like that.
Can we even go into, are you using open source models?
We did a lot of benchmarking actually. We compared, so we had several use cases and we compared different models in each of them. In some we, unfortunately, OpenAI models were better.
Unfortunately?
Yes, I was rooting for open source.
Yes.
But I still believe that open source is going to catch up.
But you said open is better. I guess you mean like a proprietary is better than open source, right?
No.
No, open source. I'm a strong proponent of open source.
Yeah, let's talk about this topic.
But she said, you said unfortunately.
I said unfortunately OpenAI models.
Why is it unfortunately?
Because OpenAI models are not open source.
Okay. That is my confusion here. You said I thought you said open models. Unfortunately,
OpenAI.
Now I got it. Sorry for my misunderstanding.
I got it from the beginning, so I must be smarter than him.
OpenAI, of course, is better than open source, but that's unfortunate. I agree.
But I think that's going to change.
But let's have this as a topic, proprietary versus open source and large language models, because I think it's a huge topic, both technically interesting but also societally interesting. But let's
Yeah, but I add that as a topic for speaking the pros and cons of open source and the Jan LeCun versus OpenAI.
And I want to hear why you are a proponent, why you wanted the open source to win. We can start there, but let's do it later.
Because I guess also SB, with the security demands it has on the data it is having, can't really send data over the internet to OpenAI or to other closed models, right?
Yeah, I mean, the trick there is that you can still have OpenAI models in a secure environment on the cloud that, you don't interact with OpenAI directly. You, for example, use Azure.
Yes.
And then they also have those models
the
there.
enterprise version of OpenAI.
Exactly. And Google Cloud provides the same. So like that problem per se is solvable. And then you can also deploy open source models on the cloud.
I have to ask though, can you put bank data in Azure Cloud?
It depends on the sensitivity class. So we have a general strategy of moving to the cloud, but Google Cloud is kind of our primary choice.
So Google Cloud is the go-to.
Yes. But so yes, we have kind of the lone strategy of moving. I don't think we will ever move all the data, but like the majority at least to the cloud. So that's the general vision. But then of course, I mean, some data sets are maybe not going to make it.
Transactions, so people's money, or you think that's going to be in the cloud as well? You don't have to.
But I think the core topic here is like I worked with at Vattenfall before, and I think you say the way we framed it is that we framed it cloud first and then. So you basically you have to have a very structured approach for your use cases and for your data.
Exactly.
And then you need to work very professionally with your data classification.
Exactly.
And everything needs to be so it puts a whole a big massive topic around computational data governance, in my opinion, like that you cannot only do this theoretically on PowerPoint. You need to have your machine readable metadata and all this stuff needs to happen at the same time.
And we have a pretty big organization that is working just with that. At SEBx we have the luxury that we do prototyping and exploration, so we don't have to work with sensitive data.
You're in the sandbox in this sense.
Exactly. So when we pick use cases, we make sure that we actually don't have to deal with sensitive data.
Yeah, smart.
Cool. If we were to just elaborate a bit more about the very interesting topic of the virtual assistant, do you call it that, or do you have like a pet name for it? Or?
We have several.
Okay. But the virtual assistant of SEB, it sounds, I think, so many companies are trying to do something similar. A lot of struggling, of course. But if you were to give some tips or some information about how do you go about building a virtual assistant for a company like SEB?
So first of all, it's not just like one generic virtual assistant. It's it's several use cases that are technically similar, that use the same type of setup and architecture, but are based on different knowledge sources and are catered towards different user groups. I would say the main thing is understand what your user actually wants. So work very closely with the business from day one. And do kind of iterative prototyping. So set something up, expose it to the users, let them test it, collect their feedback, and then improve. So those were the main kind of takeaways, and I'm really happy that we did it that way.
I'm glad that you say that as a researcher as well. This is a perfect example of like agile, development. So I love that. But also, I guess there are technical limitations that these kind of large language models are not easy to fine tune to the user data, and then you have different techniques. We had a podcast very recently speaking about RAG. And
yes, that's exactly what we did as well. Yes.
Yes.
I think that's the go-to approach.
We had the Jesper here from Volvo, and we talked. The theme was from RAG to autonomous agents. Where did we start? The big hype in 2023. Everybody did RAG, and where are we evolving to?
But if you were to just give a very brief introduction for people that don't know what RAG is, how do you go about building a virtual assistant that makes use of large language models and RAG?
Yeah, so I can start with how to not do it. So
that's a good one.
So because that's kind of what naively you may think about is I'm just going to interact with language models directly, and I'm just going to ask them questions about stuff that they weren't exposed to when training, and kind of treat them as this large knowledge base. So that's a bad approach, especially if you ask it about something that is business specific, because they have never been exposed to that data, so they will hallucinate.
Yeah.
So the
and
way
you can't put everything in the prompt either, right? So
no, exactly. So you need to kind of give it some context, right? And that context is essentially your data.
yes.
So the way to or the easiest way to deal with it is if you don't even for example, want to fine tune the model, right? So you want to just provide it your knowledge base, so it uses only that to kind of answer your questions. So you can essentially take your knowledge base, create embeddings, and then do semantic search based on the question that you get from the user, compare it to the relevant documents that you provided, extract those that match closely, and then kind of put them as a context to the language model and ask it to answer the question.
Because you did two things now. You did a semantic search to take something down to a token space that you can fit into the prompt.
Yes, exactly. So, and then you provide this context that you extracted in this kind of retriever stage, and you ask the model to answer the question given this context and nothing else.
Yeah.
Well summarized.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And that you said knowledge base, and I guess there's so many different terms here, but you have the language model. It's trained on a lot of external data, world knowledge, if you call it that.
Yeah.
Or do you have a preferred? Some people call it like world knowledge, or do you have a preferred name for what you call the thing that the whole large language model is trained on initially? Do you think world knowledge is a good term?
I don't think so, because it's just a random data set that that is very large, but it's still pretty random. And I actually
random knowledge.
I actually don't like. Maybe it's an unpopular opinion, but I actually don't like to think about large language models as knowledge bases. I think what they really are good at and how they should be used is the language itself. But then kind of relying on them as a source of knowledge, unless it's really common sense knowledge. I don't think that's a good idea.
But it's an interesting angle here. Are they actually good at knowledge, or are they good at language? And
I don't think they're trained to be.
They're not trained to be. No, they're not.
Exactly.
The objective of the large language model is to be good at language.
Exactly.
The objective is not knowledge.
Exactly.
And I think this is a misconception. We get a huge benefit that actually has some knowledge, it seems, but the objective of the exercise is language.
Exactly.
I have to disagree a small bit here. If
Why?
That's okay.
Okay,
but
let's do this.
I think language is one thing. If you just know the grammar, that's certainly not enough. You need to have at least a common sense knowledge. Without that, it would be impossible to write anything. So the common sense knowledge, at least, it has to know. It has to also know a lot of other stuff that is potentially not related at all, but could be. So it has a lot of irrelevant knowledge, for sure. But if you really want to have the model used for something that is specific for your need, then you need to add something outside of that external knowledge. But to say that it just doesn't have any knowledge,
but let's be precise. I think you need to be precise now, because what type of capability does it have? It has grammar capability, for sure. It has some sort of semantic capability or ontology type capability, so that it can reason from the text that you are, when you say the word saw.
Reason very, very simplistic.
Okay, not reason, but it can understand from the context that when you use the word saw, is it the saw, or is it something you see or you saw?
Yes.
So okay, is that knowledge, or is that semantical understanding? So I give it more than grammar. I give it more than grammar.
Yeah,
for
what
sure.
is knowledge then?
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think it's a huge amount of knowledge that it actually does have. Well, it's not specific knowledge. It's certainly not all knowledge, but it is an insane amount of knowledge encoded in these large language models. That if you very briefly describe, how can it understand if Paris refers to the city or the actor, if she is, or
the famous Paris Hilton.
Yes. Then of course it needs to understand the context. But
you agree?
If you don't think, I disagree to the concept of large language models not having knowledge. I think they have an insane amount of knowledge.
They have it, but whether it's reliable or not, it's another question.
Yes.
But let's reframe the question. This is an interesting one. Is the objective of the large language model built as an objective of knowledge, or is it the objective of
I think
being
to predict
fluent?
The next word, which is trained on, it requires the ability to understand language and have knowledge. It would be impossible for it to predict the next word without having a lot of knowledge. I would argue.
How would you say it? Because my point of view is that we get knowledge, or we get that as a byproduct, but the coding objective of a transformer is language.
Yes, I agree with you, and I think knowledge is a byproduct. Like you predict the next word or the next token or whatever you want, just based on this distribution, right? You're not actually optimizing for knowledge.
So you're optimizing for language, and in order to do language really well, it has to have knowledge. Yes.
You're optimizing for the sentence being statistically, being likely, exactly.
But the statistical argument, I mean, you could argue the same for the human brain.
Yeah, you can.
Right? You can't say it's simply trained by using statistics. You could just as well argue that the natural neuron in the human brain is also just trained with statistics, potentially.
It's an interesting one, because I can fully see your point, but I think that you can technically also argue what is it optimized for.
I disagree, because as a human you can imagine things that have never happened.
But
right?
the hallucination of large language model is amazing.
No, but you can think of out of distribution kind of things.
But do you
This is
think
fun.
that large? Yes, I love this. Do you think that large language models can extrapolate, or neural networks in general?
Yes, to a degree, absolutely.
Yes. But so can humans to a degree? Do you think they can extrapolate more than neural
I think
networks?
so. I think so.
I actually agree on that. So, but they can extrapolate to a surprisingly large extent, I would argue, even for a neural network or a large language model.
I agree with that too. I think it can do way more extrapolation than we understand even. I think that's sometimes when we are surprised today.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a very interesting philosophical.
It's a philosophical question,
right?
and if is it a problem even? I mean, like if you flip it into and discuss this from a usefulness perspective.
But is it actually extrapolation or is it interpolation?
Yeah.
Ooh, good one. That's a good one.
I mean, it's a super interesting question. If you listen to some of the machine learning street talk podcasts, they try to insist it's just interpolation. I would very much disagree with that. And if you listen to Jan LeCun, he of course says it's certainly not only interpolation. And this is an interesting topic. And if you believe in the curse of dimensionality, as soon as you move up in dimensionality of any kind of vector or representation that you have, what is really an interpolation then? Everything becomes more or less an extrapolation, I would argue. This becomes really philosophical now, but
Fun.
I think it's it's certainly an interesting one. But have you listened to the machine learning street talk podcast at any point?
No, I don't think so.
He basically refers to a neural network as a hash table, like a hash table saying, if you want to predict what pixel it should be there, it should be, you find the two closest rows in a hash table and interpolate between them, and then that's the prediction.
I think that's a simplistic view.
Very simplistic view in my view as well. And I add this as a topic later because I want to come to the point.
Let's go philosophical, but I love when we go philosophical into the details. It's a little bit like you can go philosophical in math and in astronomy, but you can go and look at the big picture, or you can look at the smallest quant picture, right? So let's be philosophical and granular.
Should
I
we
love
go
it.
1 minute more in the topic?
No, let's keep it later because I want to skip this now.
Okay.
I want to get back a little bit to before we started the pod. I asked you a little bit about how do you understand the research?
No, but let's finish the topic of virtual assistant then.
Okay, then.
We just
finish that then.
We just spoke about you want to build a virtual assistant in SEB. You mentioned that of course we should build some kind of early prototype. You should get it quickly out there, test it with the users, get the feedback, and then continue to iterate, which I think is an awesome tip and advice for anyone. And then you have some kind of large language model, and you have some kind of RAG. Can you go to any specifics? Do you know? Can you say some of the models you have experimented with? Like Mistral or Llama 2 or something?
Mistral we actually haven't tested yet, but we compared models that come from OpenAI, obviously, the models that come from Google, and a few open source ones as well. But the whole point here is to kind of have this setup as flexible as possible, so you can substitute models in the future.
Because it comes new ones every week.
Exactly. So that's kind of the whole point, to avoid this lock-in situation.
So you want an architecture where you can be model large language model agnostic to some degree.
Yes, yeah.
Exactly.
And even for the retriever part, you can also exactly.
And the retriever, it's a lot of different like vector databases or whatnot you can put there, I guess.
Yes, and sometimes you can use it off the shelf, for example. And actually, we started this very early, where off-the-shelf tools were not super nice. And now they developed quite a lot. Like, for example, the tools that come directly on Google Cloud Platform are now much better than they used to be 6 months ago.
Yeah, right.
And have you evolved in your thinking about how to do the RAG, or how sophisticated to do the whole RAG setup, or you using knowledge graphs?
Yes, exactly. That's what I want to do next.
You haven't gone down the knowledge graph path. This is the next.
Not yet.
I think this should be promising.
Yes, absolutely. And I think for much more than just RAG, for much more than just answering questions.
Because now this is the point, right? We started with RAG, and it's a hack.
Yes,
can we
exactly.
agree it's a hack? But now, okay, we learned and it works. How do we make this more real, right? And I think Jesper had some good ideas here, of course, where this is evolving. Yeah, but the knowledge graph
still nags me to say that RAG is a hack, but so is
even
Transformer.
But it is a hack.
Even Jesper said it was a hack.
Sure. Okay,
but
so
it's a useful hack.
Can you elaborate? What would how could a step moving from RAGs to more knowledge graph approach look like potentially?
So you need to build a knowledge graph. That's kind of the fundamental part, and it's and then you can kind of have this interface, natural language interface on top of that if you want to query it or whatever you want to do. The cool thing that I think we can do now with knowledge graphs that we couldn't do before is that now it's going to be easier to build them because again you can use language models to to work with unstructured data, which again you could do before when you did all this like entity resolution kind of stuff. But
if you take the knowledge graph and you think about the nodes and vertices in it, would the nodes be like the extension or intention? Sorry, let me be more clear. Would it be representations that is in clear text so you can understand it? This is a person, for example. Or would it be more of a latent space node that represents...
I think for us it's going to be real entities because it's not going to be single purpose. Okay. So you also want to kind of just treat it as a knowledge base where the user can also interact with it.
Okay, cool.
Because
so it's more traditional sense of knowledge graph. Like Google have a knowledge graph. They have all the people and cities and things happening in the world, and then you're trying to populate basically this knowledge graph in different ways.
And if I understand it right, if you do the knowledge graph evolution, you will use it for the large language models as part of the RAG, but you can use it for other things as well.
Yes, potentially for predictions if you...
Of course.
Exactly.
I'm very tempted to go into this topic again.
It's good topics. It's really good topics.
No, but it's I had so many discussions about the knowledge graph approach versus not knowledge graph approach.
You tried it early in Spotify, and you didn't.
This is like in 2010.
Exactly, but you didn't go down that path at that time.
Yeah, but I for a very long time ago, I gave a course in like semantic web and the web ontology and OLB and these kind of technologies that were supposed to be a complement to the normal web that we do have, but the machine version of the web. Everything there was supposed to be the knowledge graph for the machine. And it was very beautiful. It was very much using formal logic, this description logic kind of formalism for representing the knowledge of the world in a like global kind of knowledge graph. It's super beautiful, super mathematically nice, I would say, but it never took off. And it ended up being these kind of other solutions where you simply embedded small pockets of knowledge into HTML pages, and it never became this kind of interconnected knowledge graph, machine readable for everyone. And if anyone refers to this kind of like formal knowledge graph a la semantic web, I'm sorry, but I don't believe in it. If you believe in something else, like something that you build up, which is more like, I call it semantic, but that's a wrong word. A less formal kind of knowledge graph. then I do believe it.
But I think we have Stefan Vendin on the pod, and he was the evangelist at Neo4j before, then I have Mikael Klingvall that is working with me at Airdax, and Mikael uses a word where he thinks we need to figure out a way that is schema second. We can't build schemas and everything. We need to be able to build schema as we go. And my understanding for knowledge graph value is more the latter, what you're saying. I don't think you can represent it, but to have a way where you, as you go, add the relations, and you know, people are working, and then we do the connection. It's more like instead of having a tree structure when you're trying to structure information, you have tags and you have Google search.
Exactly.
So I think very much it's very much more organic understanding how the value is of it. This is my view.
I think what Neo4j is doing is actually very nice, because they are truly combining large language models with a graph that they are representing. So that could be a really beautiful approach.
Is it similar with your thinking? This is more organic. This is more schema second
yes,
ideas.
Exactly. And I think it should continuously evolve as well.
Yes, exactly. You cannot build if you try to build a knowledge graph on SEB, come on, it would never work.
No. And then you exactly no. And you probably have temporal aspect there as well.
For sure.
And fuzzy association as well. I mean,
but okay, I think the problem is when people are going all the way, almost fundamentalist, like the OLV or the whole thing.
It's like a whole psych project. Do you remember? Have you heard about the psych project? It is like something started in the 1980s or something, and it continued into the 90s. And I think there are still some ramifications of it. But they were supposed to build like a common sense database. So everyone was adding like. A car has 4 wheels, and that is a rule. You add it to the list, and they try to add like a complete list of all the common sense.
It's a deterministic approach in a probabilistic world. I don't get it.
And it continued, and it had like poured insane amount of research money into it, and it never turned into anything useful, I would argue. But it's still not. I mean, it's basically abandoned these days.
But we are killing it on the rabbit holes here, by the way. Yes. Are we done with the virtual agents? Because I want to get back to the topic.
Okay. Let's close this topic then, virtual agents, if we can.
You see, we couldn't do it, right? This is so fun.
Okay. Virtual assistant. Let's wrap it up here a bit. You have the kind of agile approach, trying it out while you're working,
flexible architecture, exactly.
You have a modular approach, trying easily to switch out models and RAG approaches, potentially moving into some knowledge graph approach. Perhaps you can just close off a bit what are the use cases potentially. You mentioned a bit with fact checking, I guess summarization. How would you, if you were to give some classical example use cases, what would it be?
So I think one example is if you work, for example, in customer support. So first of all, we do everything in Gen AI for our employees because we want to have a human in the loop. It's kind of, a safe setup. Wouldn't want to put in front of the customer, at least not in the foreseeable future. But it's really about increasing employee efficiency. So it's kind of helping you to navigate through lots of text that you, for example, if you work in customer support and you have your internal instructions and you kind of want to quickly answer the question while being on the phone with the customer. So
makes sense.
I think that it's a very sensible approach. Still have the human in the loop. It's basically should be there. The AI should be there to empower the human, not replace the human.
That's what I say every day.
Perfect. I love that. I love that. And I guess the number of use cases is in a large number of them. Fact checking, is one, of course.
Fact checking is a part of RAG, right? So it's like that's because you kind of want to reduce hallucinations as much as possible, even though you have a human in the loop, but you still want it to be useful. So and references like from the retriever, we also provide the actual references to the original documents and expose them to the user as well.
So if a customer calls into SEB and asks, I can't get the bank ID to confirm my loan or whatnot, then the human that is sitting there speaking to that customer can double check with the assistant asking what could the problem be, and you get a list of answers. Not
in production yet.
No, of course.
But once it is, hopefully it is.
But this is one of the clear cases, right? Yeah. To working towards this, I listened to, we had Tetra Pak on one of the conferences, and of course, Tetra Pak has huge machines, like them when they build like manufacturing plants for, And of course, then this is the same storyline. Like the service technician, I have a problem with this machine, and all this documentation about what part is this. It's the same, right? Mm-hmm. That is such a logical problem to tackle. Can I take one now?
Please.
We had a very nice little discussion when you arrived, Anastasia, and I think this is a good way to think a little bit about what is research in SEBx. And let me frame it a little bit more based on our conversation. It's like, because SEBx to some degree is the exploratory approach and the incubator in relation to the mothership of all SEB. Yep. So you gave me a quite nice picture of like the stages, how you understand research, and then how it moves into SEBx and this. I think this really frames what you do and how you're thinking about this.
Yeah, exactly. So we internally, at least, we kind of think of it as a funnel for potential topics that we might want to explore. And that, by the way, applies not only to research topics, which I work with, but also to new business models, which some of my colleagues work with. And then we kind of have these different stages, right? So stage number 1 is when you just monitor. So you see what's out there, what can potentially be interesting for us, what we can start experimenting with if that's promising enough.
So quantum computing.
Quantum computing is monitor.
But it's an example like, well, this is technology. You monitor something, you keep a tab on it, but maybe not for production yet.
Exactly. But it's still
or
kind
never.
of good.
Or never.
Sorry.
More positive on that. But
but it's a good example, right? It's a monitoring example, right?
Yes. So for now, it's monitoring for sure.
Yeah.
Then if something is promising, you can move to the next stage where you have a hypothesis like, okay, I believe that this technology is going to solve this problem. And then you can start experimenting to kind of verify or disprove this hypothesis. And then if it's really applicable, like large language models, then you can move to the next stage where you actually build prototypes. So.
And for me at least, since I came from academia as well and I moved to industry, I try to preserve the method of academia, so to speak, in industry, and also building research teams in industrial companies, which was a big interest or passion of mine at least. Sometimes it's a bit hard to argue for research because the gains of the value of a research team is much more long-term than perhaps engineering teams are. But still, the question then is, if a company is big enough, of course, then they can motivate having long-term research team in them. But I guess at some point it's hard to start motivating, why shouldn't you optimize for the next quarterly report kind of thing. I don't think you have that problem at your team.
No, and we don't have that problem in the organization, thankfully. We don't do fundamental research. So first of all, let's make things clear. So fundamental research is something you do at the university. What we do is R&D. So we don't. We can publish if we want to, and if we kind of get some nice result as a byproduct of something we do, but we absolutely don't aim to publish. So we're not advancing research per se. We're applying research. So that's point number 1. But if you only optimize for the next quarter, how are you supposed to have a long-term strategy?
Yeah, exactly. That's my question as well. So I think I'm trying to promote and make people understand that actually having teams that look at the next, not quarter, not year, but perhaps 5 years sometimes could be very useful as well.
But do you think there's a cultural difference here? In let's say a company like SEB or a company like Scania that I've been working quite a bit with, or Vattenfall. They have when you have companies with a 100-year legacy, they start behaving differently because they understand that we need to have these different horizons in how we think about our business.
Yeah. You need to have forward-looking leadership.
But I'm not sure that is. I think it's quite unique when you manage that because you're in a high innovation, high tech company like Spotify or Paltorion. Yes. But I think there's some companies in the middle here They don't have the longevity, so they haven't seen it or experienced how close to bankruptcy.
And I think so many companies are in this kind of financial,
Yes.
like marginal kind of area where they have to save every dime they have, more or less, and they are asking, "Oh, can we hire more of these people?" And they struggle not to. And at the same time, to say that you have a person that is not helping them fix the bugs that you have in the current system in production is really hard.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're in that situation, it's very hard to think long term.
Yes.
No, it is.
It is.
But I think long-term thinking is becoming harder and harder. And my hypothesis, this is a little bit like, either you have an understanding deeply at the board level of a company that has been around for 100 years because they've seen the macro cycles, they understand this.
Which we do, and I'm very grateful for that.
Which you are grateful for. Or you have these real tech innovators who knows we innovate or die, you know. Like, so those two are sort of in the safe room here, I think, that they understand the applicability of research. I think it's these companies in the middle that is really having a hard time with this story.
I think everyone should aim for having some kind of mentality that SEB has, that you need to have a balance. You can't just look short term. Of course you need, if something crashes and you have Tieto Evro kind of catastrophe happening where they ransomware everything, then of course you go short term. You do everything you can to just fix the problem at hand. But other than that, you need to have a balanced way where some work you do is long term.
I think you should always have someone who is looking long term.
Yeah, but otherwise I would argue it's just a matter of time before you will be overrun.
But let's now add Kurtzheit's accelerating returns to this topic. So when the innovation pace is increasing and when the productivity frontier is moving faster and faster, and we get to a point that you actually need to unlearn and do it and reinvent the way you do it, because otherwise the productivity gains is not even on the curve.
Yeah,
I would argue now that we are blurring what is R&D and what is business. What do you think?
Yes.
What is long term? I mean, what is really long term in the age of AI? 20 years is, forget it. 5 years maybe.
Yes, but then you also have quantum, for example.
Yeah.
I would argue that's much less.
We can get into that topic shortly.
This is maybe even a topic for after work. It's good fun.
I'm sorry for it's one of my favorite topics to speak about, but let's not go there right now.
But in a sense, then there is some sort of ladder here. I was asking if you were using this sort of technical readiness level 0 to 9 kind of model, and I think you are. But I mean, as a
we just don't
mindset,
call it. Yeah, exactly.
So I wasn't asking if there was a scientific sort of robust, but it's interesting how you understand that there is different parts to the task and objective of R&D.
But if we were to try to phrase that, one is the short-term versus long-term kind of objective, but I think there is another way to phrase also what the difference between R&D or research or let's even be more clear, science and engineering, perhaps. I have my favorite, at least, try to define what it is. Do you have any preferred way to say what's the objective of science and objective of engineering?
It depends on where you are.
Yeah.
So if you're in a research lab, then, or let's say like this: if you're a pure mathematician, everything else is engineering to you, right?
Yes, exactly. Well said. I agree.
And then as you kind of move more
Sorry
and more...
for all mathematicians out there, but you can say that as a mathematician yourself, right?
I can relate to that, let's put it this way.
Yes.
But then as you kind of move more and more towards applications, like for example where I'm now, I still have a very clear distinction between engineering, which is just literally implementing stuff where it's supposed to work, but you need to build the system, and R&D where it's not fundamental research. You're not solving a scientific problem, but you are kind of trying to figure out a way to solve an applied problem, which again is not guaranteed that you're going to actually find a solution.
So it's more uncertain. I took a bit of offense when you said engineering is just implementing stuff, because
sorry,
I actually do consider myself primarily an engineer.
But it's not just. It's actually a lot of work, and then I don't think research can exist without engineering, at least in the R&D setup.
Yeah.
I love engineers.
Yes, I do as well. And I remember some Lex Friedman podcast at some point, and they spoke about the usefulness of science versus usefulness of engineering. And I think neither can exist without the other.
Yes.
And let me try to give you my very brief definitions of them and see what you disagree with. But I think science and engineering is very overlapping, but they have a clear distinction in purpose. So science have the purpose to build knowledge, and engineering have the purpose of building products or building value, I would argue. So that means that if you take Elon Musk, he claims he's primarily an engineer. He wants to go to Mars. So everything that he uses as a measuring stick is how fast can we get to Mars. So that's like the value approach. That's like the engineering approach. That's saying, if I change the rocket engine in this way, and I have to do science to know what it is, does it get me faster to Mars or not? That's the pure like engineering mindset, I would say. How fast can we get value of it? And if you take science, then you say, I just want to understand how something works. I want to build knowledge that we haven't seen before. And I may need the engineering to be able to do so, because I need to build a prototype perhaps that I can experiment with and see, does it bring value or does it actually work or not? Sorry, I used the wrong word there. Does it actually work or not? And then everything you do, you measure by, will it actually build new knowledge or not?
Yes.
Would that make sense to you in like definition of engineering versus science?
Yes, exactly. I think so. I think it gets a little bit more blurry when you move to an applied field. Like in machine learning, it's like the discussion we had half an hour ago with the benchmarks. That's where it gets blurry. It's the same in robotics, because again, like you kind of want to solve problems fundamentally, in the sense that you want to be able to do tasks that were not visible before, but then you can also improve them, right? So you can do them in a safer way, in a better way in general.
And then you have the other argument that you have the engineering mindset of Elon Musk, but you reach then to a topic where you really need to then go deep on, you get to a topic where we cannot solve it the old way, so we need to research our way through the engineering problem. So it's not like, they're doing research, but it's actually the goal or the mindset that is maybe in one way in your definition. That is the difference.
If you want to get to Mars, there is so many things you don't know of
you
how
need to
achieve that. And what do you do with things you don't know? You do science. You build knowledge, but you do the knowledge then in the for one, to build the knowledge, and secondly, you use that knowledge to do the
But I think knowledge is the word of today's evening.
It is knowledge graphs, everything. Knowledge in large language models.
But is this a purely fun and philosophical question or definition, or is it value and usefulness in these distinctions?
I see it as problem solving, to be honest. Like especially in more applied questions, it's really like, first of all, can I solve this problem at all? Like whether the solution exists, and you can even like think about it mathematically. And then if the solution exists, like how do I find the best solution?
And people are different. Different people are driven by different needs and interests. For me, at least, reason I actually left academia to move into industry is actually the pursuit of value, to see that the thing I spend time on actually brings value.
So in the end, you kind of screw this knowledge thing. I want engineering stuff. Are you now feeling more like an engineer than a scientist?
I still have the urge of it to spread knowledge, so I do still publish, not much, but it happens. But I think at least you can spread knowledge when you build knowledge, because you do build knowledge all the time, every day of your life. But if you aim to spread knowledge in different ways, it can actually be to build a prototype.
Exactly.
Right?
And to be honest, right now I spread way more knowledge than I used to when I was in academia.
Yes. But so you still build knowledge. It's not in the form of an academic paper. It can be in other forms.
You share knowledge with people with completely different background, and I at least hope that it brings a lot of value, even without building prototypes. Even with just explain in understandable terms what the technology is and how it works.
But then is a small other angle on this, and I don't think it was Elon Musk who said it. I think it was Steve Jobs who said it, and now I'm almost swearing in here because we have this joke all the time. So, but he said something like, and I'm paraphrasing, that it's not until you start really building stuff, or you're really trying to work it out in real engineering terms that you really get to the real problem and the real knowledge. And I think Elon has said something similar, right? So I mean, like, it's the whole idea. We are iterating our way to Mars. We are building a rocket and we are blowing shit up, and we're expecting it to blow up because that is where we learn. So I think this is also a topic around knowledge.
And it's like Jeffrey Hinton, what he said. He started as a scientist and still is a scientist to a large extent, even if he was working at Google and still were very much an academic. But he said, he wants to understand the human brain. That's why he got into AI. That's why he got into machine learning. That's why he got into neural networks, because he said, if I want to understand how the human brain works, I need to build one.
It's
so he didn't build the neural network to have use for it. He built the neural network to understand how the human brain worked. And that's exact the definition of science, I would say.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
But then he come to the point that, oh shit, we built a neural network, artificial neural network, that isn't like the human brain, but it's better. And it's scary. And that's why I left Google. And now
it depends on what you mean by better.
And is Hinton part of the doomer camp or not? How would you phrase him? He made some doomer comment, but is it part of the doomer camp? I'm not sure.
No,
I don't think so.
He's a very sensible person, I must say. Extremely knowledgeable as well.
All
right. What do you do you have any thoughts about Jeffrey Hinton? Or
I don't know much about him, to be honest.
We have spoken far too much about too many rabbit holes. Should we move into the WARA, perhaps? We
yes,
don't really have time to even go there.
I think we should go proper into WARA. I think it's a super important topic for Sweden, actually.
Yeah. So, Anastasia, please, what is the WARA NLP track, or WARA to start with in general?
Yes, and maybe we should move a little bit from tracks and talk about a bit more in general. So, it's something that is called Voluntary Research Arena. So it's essentially, so first of all, WASP has several research arenas in different areas. So there is, for example, WARA Robotics, WARA Public Safety, so WARA Media and Language is one of them. And the whole point of WARAs as projects, and they are really long-term projects that are funded by WASP, is to create essentially a collaboration platform between industrial and academic participants to do exactly what we discussed, I think, at the beginning. So to help researchers find problems in real world that come from industry, and help industrial partners to actually get support in solving those problems. And bring people together and do cool stuff together.
Yes. Awesome.
And WARA Media and Language specifically, so traditionally we worked with, it kind of started with, I think, WARA Language.
Before you go in there, I mean, we should mention, I think, WASP in general. And
exactly.
It's the biggest Swedish research program we have, but it is focused on research, and it is focused on PhD students.
It's focused on fundamental research, precisely, in autonomous system software, and AI, of course.
Yes. So could we summarize for someone who has not been deep down the rabbit hole? WASP is originally a lot of focus on academia and research and adding PhD students. Yes. And WARA is now a subset where we are trying to go into this interface between industry and academia. Exactly. So WARA has a sub-objective that is a little bit different to the whole. We need more PhDs in general. Or is it the same or is it different?
Yeah. I mean, WARA also has PhD calls.
Yeah.
You can also apply for PhD funding through WARA.
Okay.
And you can also have an industrial PhD student through WASP as a general program. Okay. So there is no clear cut there.
Yeah, okay.
It's a bit of an overlap, but it's clear or more closer industrial applications, at least in WARA.
Yes, exactly.
But because when you read if you go in and read the documentation of the objectives and the steering letter, so to speak, I think there's a distinction between the WASP as an overall and WARA, I think, really focusing on this intersect.
In the sense that we have more people from industrial side kind of involved. Definitely.
Okay, so how did you get in contact with WARA, and what is your role there today?
Yes, so how did I get in contact? I actually inherited it. So when I started, long story short, WARA Media and Language originally were proposed as two WARAs, so there was WARA Language and WARA Media, and then they merged, and WARA Language was actually initiated by SEB. So it was Nicola Mock and Sella who kind of initiated that. And then it so happened that Sella left the bank, and at the time there was another colleague of mine, Cambis, who was kind of running the language track of WARA Media and Language. And then I joined the bank, and I joined Cambis, and then I kind of ended up being responsible for the language track. But I think now what we want to do is we want to rethink a little bit the agenda of the WARA. So we're kind of in the process of defining the strategy for the foreseeable future, because we believe that just thinking about language is not enough anymore, because it kind of started before this whole progress and GPT type of models happened. So at the time it was maybe more relevant to talk about, I don't know, models for Swedish language or something like that. But I think now so much happened in the area that now we can work with foundation models in general, and multimodality and embodiment, by the way, is going to be another track. So maybe we should even rethink the name, I don't know.
But it is combining media and language.
Yes, exactly.
So
exactly.
then it becomes rather natural.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we will have more tracks, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
What is the embodiment? You open up a little bit, glimpse on a specific topic.
Exactly. So you can think of it as any kind of embodied agent. So it can be a physical robot, or it can also be an agent that interacts with the world in a simulated environment. And there are kind of interesting problems in how foundation models and this whole kind of world of embodied agents play together.
So it links a little bit back to the hypothesis. We think if we talked about large language models and RAG in 2023, the hypothesis or prediction was that we will start talking more and more about autonomous agents in general in 2024, and it will be one of those words, right? And you can see this now, that when we open up the idea of embodied agents and all this, it's many different dimensions in this. So I guess quite clearly interesting that you are also seeing that involved, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was actually my suggestion. It also kind of coincided with my affiliation with KTH, because I was like, okay, so it's very clear that foundation models are going to make a huge difference in robotics in the next years. So how can we not involve embodiment?
Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And and then there is of course WARA robotics, but they are kind of I think a little bit different in the agenda. So we may collaborate with them.
Yeah. But this is actually a topic on its own. What is the relationship between large language models and agents and robotics? Because I think this is this super clear to everyone?
I guess it becomes increasingly overlapped, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Why?
Because you need to have a model that is not only working on text and not only working on a single language, or not only working on a single modality, or also working on agency or actions, or
exactly.
also working on planning, and then everything becomes connected to robotics and things, and you train everything in a single model, and how can you then separate out the things?
It doesn't necessarily need to be a single model, I don't think. I mean, so the most trivial thing that you can do, if we start from the beginning, is you can use your language model, which is just language, as an interface for the robot, right? So you can take human instructions, you can translate them into whatever the robot is doing, and that just kind of makes it easier to interact with. But that's a trivial thing. Now, if you have a multimodal model, and for example, you want to do planning in this kind of visual space, so you want to plan your intermediate steps as, say, images of your environment. That's where foundation models can also come in, because suddenly you can use them to generate your plan.
Right.
And that's actually a pretty cool thing, because planning traditionally has been a hard problem, especially task planning, when you have a lot of objects that you interact with, because of course of dimensionality, essentially, because suddenly the dimensionality of your space in which you're planning kind of explodes.
And we could go to another rabbit hole here of the... Have you read the JEPA paper of Jan Likun, by the way, in seeing these kind of different components of a future AI system?
I don't think so.
But it does have different modalities of it. One of them is like perception. Another is like a configurator to try to understand which part of the brain or the network should do what. And you can have like working memory, which is something that doesn't exist in ChatGPT, but they actually added just like a week ago or something.
Memory.
The memory add and so forth. So I certainly agree with that. We probably will have different modalities and parts of networks working together in some sense. But then the question is, should it move to the end-to-end kind of training that Elon Musk is doing with the FSD in version 12? But now we're going into rabbit holes.
Yeah, I really liked your summary here, because I was asking a question simply to get down to this story, because you can get into, well, obviously this is the same, right? But you can start from how do we create general AI? What is missing from a large language model in order to make AGI? And then we have the JEPA paper of Jan LeCun, and we have the different, well, what are the things missing? But then you can get into the actual, you can come in from, from Elon Musk's point of view when he's building Optimus,
FSD,
Optimus, he's building the robot, right? And it's a little bit like, okay, for a robot to be functional, you need to be able to give him autonomy and an agency for something. How do we do that? And in the end, these topics converge. So, so I think going with embodiment and agents is actually, in my hypothesis, an evolutionary path to better understand, what is AGI even, stuff like this.
But now we're moving into rabbit hole. We were speaking about WARA as well.
And then the dangerous one, which is AGI.
Yes.
We moved in. Okay. Back up again.
If we just try to summarize it.
Summarize WARA.
WARA
Good.
So we have the NLP track. It is expanding a bit in just not...
Yeah, I prefer to talk about it in terms of foundation models, and I think that's what the strategy is going to be.
Sounds
and then
good.
we have partners from gaming. So it's
what partners are, or which partners are part of the WARA language?
It's a really long list, and I'm afraid to forget some.
Okay. Some top names, perhaps? Spotify was part of it at least before?
Yes, Spotify used to be, so we have Electronic Arts. We have us, of course, from SEB side. We'll have Silo joining now. We have Ericsson.
Nice.
So it's quite a lot. But I'm afraid I might forget someone.
Sure.
So.
But this is more media companies, or or is it also more traditional manufacturing companies like Scania and them? Or
No, Scania I don't think we have.
No.
Okay, but I guess in general, this kind of WARA addition, how long has it existed? Like 4 or 5 years, or
Something like it started before I joined. So
I was part of that for a long while back. But I think 4 or 5 years.
But is Salla part of WARA in her new role? Or has she sort of left this field area?
We'd love to have her around. So she actually no she is a part. Yes, absolutely.
Cool. And I guess you are very much in favor of the WARA, since you have this kind of passion for industry meeting academia in different ways.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is one way to
It's a very natural way, And it's also kind of a platform to figure out what works and what doesn't, and what's needed, and what we can set up, maybe even in a more permanent basis in the country.
But moving into solutions or ideas for solutions. So one of the topics here is ultimately how can we speed up from foundational research into real world application and commercial use. I think this is a core game here.
Yes.
And we think there's still a too big distance here. And there are things that works and things that don't work. So can you give us a sort of your personal point of view of what is the sort of the blockers or gaps, and what are the potential things we should work on to make this better?
Yeah, I think what makes it a little bit difficult. So if you work in say theoretical computer science, then you don't have a problem because you just work in academia, right? But I think when you work in this kind of limbo of really applied problems, I think the problem that you run into is that if you want to do pure academic career, then you need to optimize for H-index and like citations and all of that. And in that process, you maybe miss out on solving more real problems because that doesn't necessarily lead to a publication, right? Especially like in Utopian, like it's kind of orthogonal in a sense. So I think what we long term need to think about is how to maybe redefine this whole process and have more people work in R&D, not necessarily in a company per se, but kind of maybe centrally in Sweden, working with different application areas and things like that. I think that's what we're a little bit missing.
Yeah. Awesome. I was thinking, were you connected to the Swedish AI Commissioner in a way, by the way, where SEB was, right? Or
No. It just happened to. They just happened to do a press conference to announce it at RPL in our lab. So that was just kind of fun.
Yes.
But I'm not involved in its work in any way.
Okay. But in general, I guess you're in favor of and believe in AI will help the world and Sweden and our society in different ways. This is a very simple question. How should we do it? How should we make the best use of AI? I think you have said so many good things already, saying that, of course, we need to have some part of the foundational research happening.
Yes.
But it's not sufficient. And
exactly.
We need to bring it also to industry, and we need to have them taking advantage of this and having their R&D and also their engineering work happening.
Yeah.
But what is missing then? How can, if you were to speculate a bit here, what should we do more? I guess WASP is also helping in this, in actually funding this kind of research arena.
Yes, exactly. So I think what we're missing is more jobs for people who want to kind of have this either hybrid careers or work with applied research that is a little bit maybe longer term than most companies are okay with. Because again, coming back to your question, like at SEB, for example, we're really blessed to have forward-looking leadership, and kind of it's really good that that's the case, but that's not necessarily the case for other companies. So you kind of need to have, I think, another type of organization that is focused on applied research, but at the same time kind of has a broader horizon and longer time, longer time horizon. And
so what are you envisioning here? Are you envisioning something that is government funded or like that?
In most countries, it is government funded, exactly. But it doesn't need to be. It can also be private.
And then
it doesn't really matter.
And then we have. I give an example, and I'm not sure if that's the right one. But I mean, like then we have organizations like RISE. Like in some ways that should kind of fill this topic, but maybe they're not really exactly where they need to be, or they have a slightly different agenda today, or.
I think the problem usually starts from the fact that what your sources of funding are, right, and what kind of your KPIs are.
Yeah.
Because if you're supposed to work on real cases and deliver them to industry, then suddenly you're becoming very short term. If you are just centrally funded and are completely disconnected from companies, that's another problem, because suddenly you're solving problems in vacuum.
Yeah.
So I think it needs to be a mix.
So it's actually something with the steering model here and the federated joint goals.
Exactly. So you're not supposed to be fully profitable, because then you're not doing R&D, then you're just doing...
So one of the key topics here is that if you have... It's like a Venn diagram. And if they don't meet, and you have all the funding from this angle, or you have all the funding from this angle,
yes.
and they are both trying to throw money at the middle, where we need to kind of look at what is the what is the entity that is in the middle of this, and makes this, I call it federal or like joint ownership in some ways.
Yeah,
so actually, RISE doesn't have joint ownership, and something that is completely commercial doesn't have joint. So there's another type of entity which is some sort of joint ownership. Is that a summary?
Yeah, I think so. Because you need to have the flexibility of actually thinking about problems long term. But at the same time, you need to have a close connection to real world. So that's the conundrum here.
So you can't really solve it in either camps. So there needs to be a camp in the middle. That is something that we don't really exactly have, maybe.
It can be mixed funding, for example.
Yeah. And I agree to a large extent. If I just were to try to find some potential exception, and I'm sure you agree with this as well, is that most companies cannot do the more foundational research, of course, and it needs some more perhaps government funding or something else to happen. But a lot of research can happen in industry as well. And if you take the superscalers of the world, they do a lot of foundational research as well, right?
Yeah. If you look at the Meta team, for instance, or Google.
Yeah. But let us not forget that WASP, for example, actually comes from private source, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
I find it amazing.
I mean, that's another example of a tech or at least a non-government agency actually doing a lot of foundational research.
And frankly, it's a fantastic contribution to the Swedish society.
Yeah,
it's absolutely fascinating.
And I think it's offensive that the Swedish government is not matching what someone is doing, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. It's very sad.
I think it's super sad. I mean, like, okay, that we need someone to step up, like WASP, but not even trying to match, not even trying to be part of it. I find it offensive, to be honest. I find it really strange.
But my point a little bit was that we do have some superscalers, and they are super profitable, extremely the most profitable companies in the world, literally. And they also do, more and more research, and having even more money makes them able to do research even more long term.
Yeah.
And they perhaps are accelerating at a pace that is beyond the normal type of companies. And Henrik and I have been speaking about this for a long time. We call it the AI divide in some way, and we can perhaps even more see it now with large foundational models being increasingly important, that a very, very few number of entities in the world are able to train them. Is this something yet makes you scared that it becomes, normal universities can never train like a large foundational models these days?
Oh, you can. On Brazilius.
It's not the scale of ChatGPT, or it could never compete with the tech giants kind of size that they have.
Yes, but I believe that we'll have more data efficient and compute efficient models going forward.
So we should, but we should take it on and do this.
Do you think? I mean, today we know it's not the case. They have insanely more researchers than Berzelius has. Or even if you take all the European data centers we have combined, it's nothing even close to what OpenAI has, or Microsoft has, or Google has, or
exactly. But as a pure researcher, I don't think you should be competing with big tech.
But my point was that you are seeing like an acceleration of the superscalers, that they are gaining more and more money, they are getting more and more knowledge, they are getting more and more value, and this is a dangerous trend. If that kind of gap keep accelerating, it would be a concentration of power that potentially is a bit scary.
Yes, that's why open source should be supported.
Yes, good. So this is a good topic. But I hope also that it could potentially reduce the importance of academia if they don't have the ability to do the type of research that a very few number of entities otherwise can do.
But I don't think it reduces the importance of academia. I think that's actually a fundamental misconception, because it just means only one thing, that the technology became ready for industry, which means that as an academic, you're supposed to think more long term. So just do research in other areas, or in
But let's say that. Okay, I mean, we should do the news section, I guess, at some point. We haven't done that. But there is one area now where OpenAI and Sam is investing insane amount of money now in something that is, we perhaps can speak about that shortly. But if this keeps accelerating, they will have something proprietary that no researcher will ever be able to get insight into. They can't do research on it except through APIs, but really do any kind of introspection.
Yes, that's dystopian, I agree.
And that, it's a dangerous future. And should we do the news, by the way, you think, or should we?
I haven't been in the loop for news.
Okay. But perhaps it's a good time to do the news then, anyway. What do you think, Henrik?
I think we can. I think we can stop here, and I think take a reflection, because there's a big topic around the corner here. I think to discuss how important it is with open source versus proprietary models, and I think it's somewhere where we can also question. Academia should really be on the open source side as much as possible, in order to, if we now want to pool our resources somewhere, we should really pool them into open source. But this is maybe then we take the news. Do we have the jingle? Otherwise, we do. And now the AI news. And since Goran is not here, there is no jingle, Goran. But here is the AI news of the week.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Henrik. So for your...
It's time for AI news. Brought to you by AIAW Podcast.
So we've been trying this new thing during the autumn to have a small break in the middle of the podcast, and then we go back to the discussion and hopefully back to the open source question, which I'd love to discuss more with you, Anastasia, about. But let's do a few minutes of some topic and that we all speak about. And perhaps I can start because I have one connected to the very topic we just spoke about first.
Yeah, so just, Anastasia, if you have a topic of something you read in the news that you think is newsworthy the last week, more or less. So everything was happening so fast. So we thought, okay, what is the major headline news in the field of AI? If you have it, you have it. Otherwise, don't worry about it.
I think I missed last week.
Yeah. Let's Anders, you go first.
Yeah, well, during the last week, I think it happened last week before this, but anyway, it's been one story that's been over the media quite a lot, and that's that Sam Altman, the now still again the CEO of OpenAI, is apparently raising money for a new chip company. And this is nothing new. We heard about Rain AI, and it was like a couple of billions of dollars, like you need $50 billion for that. But now suddenly they are speaking about raising $5 to $7 trillion.
Which is an obscene amount if you think about the GDP of countries in the world.
It is absurd. I mean, if you take I think the market cap for Microsoft now is $3 billion. Apple is slightly below. And then you say they are raising this amount of money. You know, I'm an investor myself, and you know, if they are raising that amount of money, it should be valued at least 4, 5, perhaps 10 times this. If you take a company that's valued, let's say 5 times to have it in a low range, to that, it's like $30-40 trillion. That's like the amount of all the publicly traded companies combined.
But
it's like insane amount of money.
Yeah, but why is he doing it then? Because then you need to unpack this. Is this just a marketing stunt? I mean, like the onslaught of comments on this obscene number. There are many angles to this. So how did you want to unpack that? Because that he said it, good. Yeah. Is it a marketing stunt? You know, what was your take on it?
I really don't know, and I hate to speculate this much, but I think it's such an important topic that we have to speculate, even though we know nothing basically about it. But you know, Sam has himself, you know, commented on it on X, so it can't be completely rumored, but perhaps it's a marketing stunt.
But okay, so the backdrop is maybe important if you're not fully into this. It's like we were talking about the semiconductor business, and that has been super concentrated to Taiwan, and to actually one company in the world who has sort of such a world dominance. And I think during the COVID in different ways, we have seen how fragile the whole supply chains has been on this. So I think everybody grew up, if not before. So from the Scanias to whatever company, that we have a semiconductor shortage, and in the end, in the geopolitical powers, I think Sam is basically doing a very simple job. He's going to the people that has a geopolitical interest and say, hey man, it's time to get into the game. And then if you go back then and have sort of studied the semiconductor business, and there is some really interesting books you can read on the history of semiconductors, the entry ticket, you know, into that game, you know, we're talking now building foundries and stuff like that, the foundational stuff, you know, to get stuff done. And this is massive. And then you add neomorphic to that story.
But this is the Rain.ai. I don't think this is going to
Isn't the Rain going to go neomorphic? I think that's the whole point.
But I don't think this 7 trillion thing.
Okay, do you mean the 7 trillion is just semiconductor in general?
I don't know what it is, but I think it's more than Rain.ai.
Yeah, but
I think Rain could be part of it, but I don't think that's the whole thing.
But I think the bottom line is that this is a geopolitical play by Sam Altman, where he basically raises the super riches and the superpowers who sort of thinks, oh, we need to be in control of this destiny here, and we need to dominate this, you know, and then maybe those money makes sense. I don't know.
Imagine going to some investor, you know, he went to like Saudi Arabia or this Saudi Aramak, the biggest, you know, oil producer in the world. And they apparently invested in Rain, I believe, but they were declined later by US because of geopolitical reasons.
Exactly.
But, you know, to go to someone and say, I want to raise $7 trillion, and then someone, what do you mean? They have to have such a pitch deck, you know, to this one, to say that you're going to invest more money than any company in the world is even worth today. I mean, they must have, then you can see so many conspiracy theories about this.
Yeah.
They are saying, of course, this is AGI. Of course, they have now a proof. If anyone going to put in 7 trillion, of course, they have been able to prove that they have AGI in-house, and that's why they're getting this. But this is just conspiracy theories. We don't know if it's true.
But in the end, if you take it all the way back, even if it's just a stunt, it works. It works because it raises the stock price of Microsoft. Even it raises all this.
What do you think, Anastasia, about this crazy raising money, funding investments?
I'm on the cynical side.
Yeah, you don't think it's a stunt?
Yeah, but I think there was some other interesting comments in relation to that. I can't exactly phrase the article I read. I can't quote it, but it was more or less like a little bit like, what has the world come to when someone, how are we thinking philosophically as human species when we can, and how can we let the capitalist view on this dictate these topics? So something is fundamentally, like there was an article that there is some fundamentally flawed thinking here. Not per se Sam Altman and stuff like that, but more like what has the world come to? I don't know if you read a couple of those articles as well. So there was a lot of commentary on this.
It's depressing if you think about it.
Obscene. Yeah. All right, let's leave that. I have another one, but I almost let you do it, but I can lead into it. OpenAI rolls out ChatGPT memory to select users. What is that all about, Anders?
Oh, thank you for dropping that.
I put the news on, but okay. So I can start it. I can start it.
I think.
But it's an interesting one, right?
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, but I can start. But you need to take it up. So sure. OpenAI has begun rolling out memory capabilities to a select number of ChatGPT users. Okay, interesting. So we can now control the memory. We can put it off and on, but I think the interesting point that I think to some degree is missing in some of these comments is what it means. I think the articles I read now has done a pretty poor job in sort of what's the wow factor of the memory topic here. Yeah. So help me here.
No, but this is back to the RAG. I mean, if you were to guess what they have done, it's simply adding RAG to ChatGPT and then putting that for every user, and they put it to GPT-S as well as separate memories. So in short, it's since ChatGPT can't be fine-tuned quickly, and the only added or other way to go forward to be able to quickly adapt to what you have said recently is to have some kind of memory added to it. So this is perfectly the short-term working memory kind of thing that you add on top of the large language model that contain the basic knowledge, if I may say so. But it has short-term knowledge versus long-term knowledge then in two separate parts. And of course, it's super powerful. It can remember, if I want to always summarize the quarter report from this company in this format, then you don't have to say it the next time. You just, send it in and it remembers, your preferences and whatnot. And it knows your children. It knows everything you wanted to change. But actually, it did have a feature, if I don't recall incorrectly, to erase memory. This was kind of interesting. You can, of course, turn it off. If you don't want it to have memory of what you have said before, you can turn it off completely. You can also say, this, I want you to memorize.
And never forget.
Maybe. But you can also go in and see what it has memorized and delete parts that you don't like. Imagine if I could do that to you, Henrik. Can go, Henrik, please remove these memories from the late nights in the podcast.
The karaoke, please remove this karaoke experience.
It would be awesome.
But Anders, you almost said it like, this is, the short-term memory or adding memory is a little bit what, you could call that is what we're doing with the RAG. Yes. So if this is a large language model and when we add a RAG, as we discussed before, it's a little bit like the short-term memory. Do you think that's the technique here, or is it something else?
Long-term, I don't think, but short-term, yes.
You think that's what it, do you understand it that's literally what, when they say memory, it seems fancy and all this, but it's something that allows you to then put in your own text?
kind of sure of it. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts.
I haven't looked into it,
Yeah.
but
No, I don't, because it's so interesting, right? The technicians get a hold of it, and we call it something, strange, RAG, retrieval, what is it?
retrieval augmented generation. Yeah.
Retrieval augmented generation, and then when the marketeers get a hold of it, memory. So
I mean, it's obviously some kind of RAG-based technique. They simply have some passage of text that or other type of content that they remember over a session.
But and do you think people would like this? Because I can take another angle on this, like that it feels kind of safe. I feel like if I'm an enterprise, we are using them over there, but the RAG thing, I want to be having my own control, and I do it even if I'm doing it shitty, it's in my server sort of thing. While now I'm going to do my thing inside the other thing. So I think there's a question here. You can use the memory feature, but do you want to use the memory feature rather do your own RAG at home? I think it's also a matter of controlling your data here.
Yeah, but so many people are not aware of that problem, I think.
Yeah.
And it maybe is a bit scary the first time or first months, but then you get used to it.
It's going to be so much more seamless, of course.
It's like putting data on Facebook.
Exactly.
It's scary, but everyone does it, right?
Anyway,
most people.
So the memory part, and then they launched that. This is some sort of alpha beta, I guess. It's not really out there yet for us to try, so we don't know yet. Good.
Yes. Okay.
Do we have one or two more news?
Yeah, I think time is flying by so quickly.
Time is flying, so we had 2 news today.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay.
Done.
Or did you have something you wanted to
Did you have something that you sort
No,
of
I think I completely missed last week.
There are better things to do, right?
Or more urgent things to do.
Cool. Should we move into, before we go to the final kind of philosophical part, I guess we already had a lot of philosophical discussions, but...
Yeah, about knowledge especially.
Sorry, what?
About knowledge especially.
Yeah.
Knowledge, yes, exactly, knowledge, yes. But let's go for the open source discussion, right?
Please, I think that's a good one.
Let's see how we can phrase it. I guess the question is, we've seen OpenAI, if we start with that, they're supposed to be open, supposed to have open source, meaning code, open models, meaning parameters, open data potentially, meaning data trained on, but basically neither is true now for OpenAI.
Yeah, none of that is true.
None is true.
And it's hilarious that it's still called open.
Yeah, isn't that the funniest, cynical? Yeah.
So that's that. You can laugh about that, and I saw some. Anyway, let's not go there. It's kind of strange, and they also are a for-profit or capped profit company, as they call it, but they certainly not are a non-profit company at least. Anyway, I don't think there is anything wrong with being for profit, but then you should be open with it and say that you are driving your company for profit.
Yeah.
But let's sharpen in on the core topic now. Question.
Yes, thank you, Eric. Okay, so that's potentially a problem with OpenAI, but in general, then we can potentially see a trend also with additionally large number of companies going proprietary, meaning not publishing their large foundational models to the general public. Let me start with that. What do you agree with that trend, and what do you think about it?
I think it's a mixed bag. I mean, so I think you will have both kind of proprietary. OpenAI is not going anywhere, right? And there's going to be other vendors that have their own proprietary models, and I think that's fine as long as you have alternatives. So that's kind of where open source comes in, because if you want to use open source, it should be competitive enough in terms of performance, so you can actually make that choice. I don't want to ban proprietary models. There's certainly a market for that, and it's perfectly fine.
But the core topic here, let's add the Jan LeCun argument here. So, from a more societal point of view, language and I don't know how exactly Jan LeCun is phrasing it, but it's more or less like this is something that for society, or how we understand language, shapes how we understand ourselves, and it shapes so much. So obviously we need to have this open and contributed to by mankind. This is sort of the Jan LeCun argument that there is some fundamental topics that this needs to be open source and like this. And then I have a third angle that we will have a guest here, Erik Hugo, in a couple of weeks, who has a background in South Africa. He lives in Sweden, he's South African, but he has seen firsthand the tech divide towards the developing countries, and he is on a very, very strong opinion that if it wasn't for Linux, if it wasn't for the real open source, it did so much for the developing countries, and basically it's impossible for 80% of the world to even think about paying for using ChatGPT. So there needs to be something in order to not to build the AI divide, sort of in the macro topic. So I think this whole open source topic is huge.
Yes.
What are your main arguments for open source?
Is to have alternatives, really. So, like I said, and it's the same as with software. So you want to have a model that is, available to you. Which you can just download. You can fine tune it whatever way you want. You can, do research again with it, and you kind of want to not lock in yourself into like one of these big tech model providers. And I think the cool thing is that big tech is actually also fine with it, right? So if you like Google, for example, like their strategy, you can see how it has changed over the past 6 months. So if they started with training their own models, then the narrative kind of shifted towards, don't bet on the model, bet on the platform. And I think that's a healthy way of looking at it.
Okay. And why do you think? Do you think it's because the potential abuse that can happen if they do open source models, or what do you think the reason for Google to go platform instead?
I think they realized that they cannot compete with the open source community, and then there is no point in competing.
Sorry, I misunderstood you. So Google, you said in the last 6 months have moved from what to what?
From bet on the model to bet on the platform. That's the narrative now.
Yeah.
Which I very much like.
Can you decompose that?
Yes.
What do they mean?
Yes. So what you can do, for example, as an enterprise, if you use Google Cloud Platform, you can use either models that are trained by Google, be it Palm or be it Gemini, or you can also use open source models in Model Garden, like in the.
So what they are doing is they have their model, but they're opening up to using any. They're trying to be model agnostic as long as
they allow you as a developer. Using their platform to be model agnostic, and they expose open source models to you as well.
If you turn that the other round, they're basically locking you into the platform.
Yes, but that's their business model.
Yes, okay, but it's not really moving in the open source direction. So
no.
closed source when it turns to their
I'm
own
not saying
models.
I'm not saying that they have an altruistic motivation here.
No.
They need to do their business, and it's also understandable.
But by its method, then they're also for profit. Why are they still in the open source track, you think? I think, as a lot of companies are finding a lot of valuable business models based on open source code, there can be so many examples, Elasticsearch or whatnot, so many softwares that are out there that are open source, and then you build some business model on top of it, either some kind of enterprise license or some support service or whatnot, but it's based on open source, and by having it open source, it allows other people to help you develop it, and it's actually very valuable from a profit point of view to have other help you developing your own product.
Exactly, and this way you also kind of reduce if you don't want to directly compete with, say, OpenAI training their own models, but suddenly you have a full range of alternatives, then OpenAI also will lose eventually the competitive advantage.
Potentially.
That's another, I think.
What's the observation? In the end, my take, if I look at sort of the classical example of analytics and how fast the open source has moved in terms of frameworks and what you can do versus what you can find in packaged application. We can go all the way back to SAS Enterprise Miner and back in the day, and then when R really came into the university, and it just exploded as a. So there was no way they could compete in terms of having, Do we think open source in the end sort of has by the sheer numbers the upper hand, or is the ball game different this time?
Can't we try to separate? What are the potential positive aspects of open source? I think of a number of them. One is purely scientific. I mean, if you want to be scientific, you should open source it because it spread knowledge, and it helps other researchers understand how does Llama 2 work? By them having the ability to download it, look into it, and examine it, and do research themselves on it. It helps with research. So if you are pro-research, you should be open with it. I mean, that's basically what science is. You are open with knowledge, right? So for scientific research or purposes, it should be obvious that you should put the model out there, potentially.
This is one core benefit.
Yeah. Another, I would say, is actually for profit. I think that there can be business models built on top, and we've seen a number of them, where it is profitable to open source your source code, and then you add a business model on top of it. So I think that can be argued as well. Not in every case, but for some cases. Then I think what Jan LeCun is trying to fight all the time is the abuse argument. Now this is what OpenAI and Google are all claiming. They are not open sourcing because they are afraid about abuse of their model, right? At least that's my take on it. They are afraid that they will take this model and do a lot of propaganda. They will generate a lot of sexually explicit content. They will, do so many things. They will build bombs and help people do terrorist attacks and so many things. That there could be, or create a new coronavirus. I mean, there are so many potential abuses that you can use this incredible wealth of knowledge that these models have. And then the question is, how do you prevent that? Either you close them up, or you put them out there so people can help you
combat it and find it.
Yeah. What do you think?
Exactly. I think the latter approach is much better. And again, it's kind of this whole demonopolization of the whole area.
Yeah.
That's something that is very close to my heart.
But what do you think about the abuse approach? I mean, the question. I mean, would it be foolish of Google, or let's say OpenAI now has, GPT-5 around the corner, or 4.5, or whatever it will be called, and potentially it's super powerful. Would it be negligent of them to simply put it out there and let anyone use it for whatever purposes they wanted to?
I don't think that's going to happen. No, I don't think it would have, I'm not a doomer, right? So I don't think that is a problem per se. And then again, they're not the only agents in the world who can train large models. Let's just be clear on that.
But one of the few at least.
Yeah, but you can have China training their own models.
You can what?
You can have China, training their own models as well.
And they do.
Exactly.
But they put their own guardrails, and they are very careful what they source.
For sure. But if you're concerned about propaganda or Russia, that's inevitable. That's going to happen. And I don't think not open source and OpenAI models is a way to deal with this.
It won't solve the problem.
Exactly.
If you were Sam Altman, you would open source GPT-4.
That's a question about business model.
Yeah, I think so too.
I just don't buy into the risk argument.
Yeah, for him to stand on some high horses and arguing that this is better for mankind is bullshit, in my opinion.
Exactly.
So he has, but he might have super legitimate resources to do it the way he wants to do it. But make no mistake, it's a business play ultimately.
Yeah, they just say so.
Yeah, you say so.
That's perfectly fine.
This is perfectly fine as well, I think, because I think. When you're trying to sort of hide the raw business truths on something that is, he doesn't really hold, right? Because you're not solving the problem that way.
It's highly hypocritical. Exactly.
Yeah, I don't buy it. I think it's quite easy to see through it.
Yeah.
And I think there is a place, as we said, for proprietary models and open source models. There are certain cases, I'm sure, where this makes sense. Or the whole platform, and you're locked in, and this is terrible, but it's maybe way simpler, for an enterprise example, it makes kind of sense, because it's going to be really challenging in other ways to have it, I don't know. So there is a place for all. What about the core benefit that we need to solidarity?
Let me ask you, Henrik, if you were Sam Altman, and let's say that you are not allowed to make any money from it, which he actually is not. He has no equity in OpenAI. But let's say that you had the responsibility of the profit of OpenAI, and now it cannot make money. So let's say that it's impossible for them to use the argument of profit. Would you then open source ChatGPT or GPT-4?
I would.
I mean, I look at this more and more from the AI divide point of view. I look at more and more. I'm very influenced by Erich right now, who sort of I think it's a real problem when we're going down a path where 80% of the world's population has no way of working with proprietary models because they don't have the financial means to do it. So I think to find models or for us to sort of more heavily lean open source first, then if that doesn't work, proprietary, I think this is better for mankind. So therefore, I'm not in the business position. So if I'm arguing from,
I'm just saying that the abuse argument is not something to be tribaled with, at least. And I think it's very interesting what Jan LeCun and Meta is doing, and they've been successful so far. But they had a setback. Yeah, if you go back a bit, when they built a language model for generating research articles, and they had so much backlash from that they had to shut it down quickly. But that they are still, going at it.
But let's be clear now. Help me out, because Jan LeCun's argument around abuse is that the safest way is to have it open, because then we can work on. Then it's open for everybody to work. There will be people that are doing this for bad reasons. Yes. But now we can have more people working on finding the bugs, finding the holes, and all that.
And that's a great argument.
So he's proposing that open source is actually the safest approach.
That's his argument. But it's easy to see that anyone can then download the version and take this guardrails away.
Because you
see the problem.
Yeah, I see the problem, but there are clearly two camps.
Yeah.
Where he has a philosophical view that this is safer, and other people saying this is so powerful, so we cannot let anyone look into it.
Yeah.
I think in reality, but this is my personal opinion.
Let me ask a very provocative kind of question to you.
Yeah.
Would you put a loaded gun in the sofa to your 2-year-old kid?
But how is that relating to our argument?
They would learn then how to use it, right?
It's a bit insulting to humanity, I think.
No, but can you use those kind of metaphors?
If you have a large language models that tells you can ask it, how do I build a gun, or how do I build a bomb? This is one of the core questions that you are used as an example. If that is given to any kind of person out there, even people with psychological problems or immature minds, someone is going to do it. Yeah. And someone is going to use that gun and pull the trigger potentially. And that can be.
So from this
really
argument
dangerous.
then we shouldn't have open source models. We should have proprietary models.
I don't have any answer. I'm just saying.
But because is that why can't you get exactly the same result from a proprietary model?
Because they have to put safeguards in place. Guardrails in place.
Or you mean because when it's a proprietary model built as a product, there's a lot of things that
goes. You can't remove it. Yeah, and you can't remove it.
That basically
but
puts
if
a lot of
source, you can easily remove it.
But is that?
Okay, so open source you can remove safeguards. Yeah, that's the argument.
Yeah.
But is that really the biggest threat? Which is just a random person. I don't know, some lunatic interacting with ChatGPT and trying to ask it how to build a bomb and failing because of the guardrails. Is that really the biggest problem?
I don't know. You tell me.
Is that the biggest threat for?
I'm sure there are a lot of others.
Exactly.
But still, there will be a lot of abuses to it.
Yeah, but those people can also Google for that information.
But you have but that argument, the large language model is significantly more efficient in providing knowledge than a Google search is.
But Anastasia, what is your fundamental stance on open source? Because I think you can arrive into we should go open source from different perspectives. So what is your fundamental, what is your entry point into why this is good, or why it's the right way?
So my main argument is demonopolization, because when you have just a few tech companies competing with each other, and you kind of ultimately need to choose your poison between,
So here we don't have an argument, because I end up that this is the biggest threat. Yep. This is the bigger threat for mankind than if you do the gun to a 2-year-old argument. So for me, it's like choose your poison.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm choosing my poison, and I'm choosing it based on the same argument as you are. And I think it's about the AI divide ultimately for mankind.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope you don't think I'm against open source.
No. We are steel man. We are straw manning. I love it. So it's
because my argument, for open source would basically be sure, you can try to keep some models safe, but it's just a matter of time before someone else will put it out there. So why not try to do it quickly?
Like, because
Isn't that what happened with Llama?
Because since I know Anders, I know he was steelmanning the argument because he is on this. He's thinking exactly the same as us, but for the sake of discussion, I know what you're doing, Anders, and I love it. But I think if I'm going to be super transparent, I think about this from Eric's point of view, where we talk about tech and AI apartheid. We're doing stuff that literally puts a large population of the world, and we're putting ourselves in this monopolistic situation, which has never proven good for mankind. This has led to revolution. It has led to really bad divides in society and economical, which leads to war, which leads to geopolitical problem, which of much bigger scale.
Exactly.
And this is the ultimate. This is my end game, where I think choose your poison, and I would take all the different poisons in order to focus on getting this right.
Yeah.
I think just to end a bit with Elon Musk, kind of. Sorry for this. No, but completely removing the guardrails and regulation around these very powerful technology would be very dangerous.
Yes, I agree with this.
So we need some kind of regulation, because it will be very dangerous unless we try to minimize the risk.
But this is a really healthy argument, because if you fundamentally ideology-wise, we say we must go open source. Then we open up that can of worms, and then we understand what we need to do open source in the safest way. This is a good argument, because that becomes, okay, what do we then need to do with open source for this to work in the best way? Yep. That's a good argument. That's a good discussion.
Well said, yes, I think so. But just so don't anyone thinks that we are, in some kind of world without regulation, because that would be super dangerous. With
so it's an ideological topic of open source. Then from that standpoint, what do we regulate? How do we do it?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, regulating is one thing, but criminals can also train models if they have enough resources and if it's profitable enough.
Yeah,
right?
Yes, this is true. This is a really good argument. Really good.
You're not going to ban GPUs.
Well,
no.
they're trying to.
They're
trying to have export control to China.
Because you get to the export laws around weapons. And I can just imagine when with the whole AI Act, you can sort of take this really wrong way that we need to have export laws on GPUs.
And then you have a black market. And then you have a black market.
US already have.
They have, right?
Yeah.
Nvidia did that, right?
Yeah, but that's just a matter of time.
But they will
have
what
their
purpose?
Own GPUs.
Sorry, but.
Yeah, but they don't yet. This is a very interesting geopolitical topic about TSMC and ASML and so forth. But that's the time is flying. It's over.
But it's actually and it's in this vein that the 7 trillion now makes sense for some people.
Yes.
Interesting.
Okay.
Great stuff.
Should we end up with the final question, perhaps? The time has flown away, and we are far above time limit here. But Anastasia, what if AGI becomes a reality? What if Sam Altman's 7 trillion investments come home and he builds something that is potentially an AGI? What kind of world do you think it will turn out to be? Will it be this kind of dystopian nightmare, like the Terminator and the Matrix of the world, where machines are trying to kill all people?
I don't see that happening anytime soon.
No? Or do you believe more in the other extreme? I mean, you can think of two extremes here. One is the dystopian one. The other one is the super utopian one, where everything is awesome. We have a world of abundance. We have the world where we don't have any energy crisis. We don't have any hunger. We don't have any lack of education. And humans are free to pursue the passions and creativity as they see please.
Yeah. So to start with, I don't think that's going to happen soon. So we're
the
completely...
dystopian one?
No, either. Like, I don't think AGI is going to happen.
Okay. Do you have a prediction for that? When do you think potentially?
Not in the foreseeable future. I'm very skeptical.
In 5 years,
but even if
20 years, 50 years?
Not in 5 years.
Okay. Cool.
But even if we were to hypothesize, I think the truth is always somewhere in the middle, right? So because it never happened, that like we never had a complete dystopian scenario in history. I mean, you can
potentially, but it turned.
But
out
it also never happened.
No, but it was close potentially.
Yeah, but still, and now we're back. Okay. And yeah, utopia I definitely don't believe in because I'm not much of an optimist.
That's a good argument. Okay.
That's good.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it's we'll just need to adapt it.
Yes. And I think that's a good argument, because humans, and even Sam Altman said this once, he was asked the question, will this not create a huge change in the whole world? And he said, no, it will have a huge impact, yes, but humans will adapt.
And we adapted so far to everything.
Yeah.
Humanity still exists.
I'm looking forward to a future where they have super intelligent agents, actually. Are you? Are you looking forward to that?
I would like to see that because I'm skeptical.
You don't see the possibility of a super intelligent agent?
No, I don't think we're there.
No, but in 10 years then.
Yeah, and I mean, sure, I understand that OpenAI is absolutely not open about what they do, but just given the time frame, I don't buy into it.
But in 50 years then, your children, for example. If you take the Max Tegmark's argument, did you listen to his summer talk?
Yes, and I was asked so many times about it.
Yeah, you were. You hate it as much as me, perhaps. But are you afraid about your kid's future?
No. Also, he's a physicist.
Yes.
I love it. But actually, spinning on Max Tegmark, his book Life 3.0, he paints a couple of different scenarios. Or he's trying to build a picture of different scenarios, what different camps think about this. There's another discussion on sub-level, AGI, yes and no. Then we have, will there be some point in time where something goes a lot faster? So he has a scenario where sort of, actually, we will actually probably get to AGI, but it will kind of be like, I guess we passed it already. We didn't notice it almost. It's more evolutionary versus something where there is something happening where the speed really exponentially goes much faster.
The fast takeoff.
The fast takeoff. So it's the fast takeoff of intelligence or something like that. I mean, we don't need to talk about super intelligence. We don't need to talk about AGI, but we can talk about fast takeoff versus something that kind of resembles
boiling the frog kind of thing.
Versus what we're seeing now. We're seeing ChatGPT. It doesn't feel it's super fast in one way, but it's still evolutionary.
It's absolutely not fast if you think about it from the technical perspective, right? It was fast for the general audience because there was nothing, and suddenly there was this.
But for everybody who followed GPT's
exactly, it was a very natural development.
Yeah,
it's just that they did right marketing. They exposed it to the general public for free. They generated lots of hype. Sure. Yeah.
So in reality, the fast takeoff scenario still feels kind of more unlikely than an evolutionary topic. We will reach there in some ways, but we will not feel it.
It's going to be epsilon improvements because that's just how life generally works.
And we will work on the next abstraction level of problems, right?
Yes, exactly.
And with this power now, we have bigger problems we can now tackle.
I must still ask, were you not surprised by the scaling laws, by the ability for a model to simply double inside and just continue to increase, or you double the amount of data and it just continuously increase in power, and it doesn't seem to stop anywhere? Didn't that surprise you?
I think it's a curious fact, but I don't think it's much of a surprise.
Okay, well, it was a surprise to me actually. That's interesting. Okay, so how should we summarize your feeling about like an AGI future?
In the middle.
Not happening.
No. Not happening in the near future, somewhere in the middle, and evolutionary.
Yeah, exactly. And humanity will adapt even if that happens.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah,
I think that's a pretty good scenario, actually. I don't think that's a dystopian. I think that's just
I think it's
life.
realistic. Exactly.
I think we will be surprised by the pace, but so I'm more on.
You think it's going to be
the Kurzweil kind of side here?
The accelerating, it will accelerate. It will go faster. Yeah, it will.
Anyway, I'm hoping that you can continue for some time, Anastasia Varava. I hope we continue to speak about quantum computing because I'm looking forward to speak more about that. But let's do that after the cameras have turned off. Yep. And thank you so very much for coming to this podcast.
Very fun discussions.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a lot of fun.
So much fun. Thank you.
Thank you.